It's the day we've all been waiting for, at least almost there. We've finally reached the end of closing arguments in the Girardi trial. We also have Christopher Kimone's trial that's going to be coming up early next year. But it looks like the jury will be making their decision hopefully soon. Unlikely that we'll get a decision by end of day Monday, but hopefully by end of day Tuesday, we'll have an answer. Here to help me break down everything that went down in court today during closing arguments, I have Stewart, Albertson, and Keith Davidson of Albertson and Davidson LLP. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us, Zach.
I mean, this case, I feel like this trial is ever turning. I feel like going into it, I was like, there's no way there's going to be any shred of a doubt that he's going to be found guilty. And I feel like along the way, in my opinion, the defense actually made some really decent points. But Keith, what was your reaction to the closing arguments today? We read our recaps. I know law.com and LA Times have put out some recaps, and we have some reporters that have been on the field.
Yeah, and there's been some excellent reporting in this. And, it's kind of the same old theme that we've heard throughout the trial, which is the defense is saying Tom Girardi lacks capacity. They're appealing to common sense. They're saying, if you go Tom Girardi's way, you're ruling on the side of somebody who's suffering from dementia. Very, kind of a sad old man type of defense theory throughout the entire trial. And then, of course, the prosecutor is saying, no, this is a Ponzi scheme. This is something that was going on for a long time, and that Tom Girardi knew what he was doing, and he understood that he was defrauding people for well over a decade.
So we have 4 cases that we heard in court. He's facing 5 counts of wire fraud, and I believe he can face up to 20 years per count. I don't think it's likely that he's going to get that much time. Stewart, what do you think is going to be the ultimate verdict from the jury?
Well, it's going to be guilty, in my opinion. The question is sentencing, and anything that Tom Girardi gets at this point in his life, at 85 years of age, it's probably going to be a life sentence. I tend to agree with you, Zach, that they're not going to hit him with 20 years, or they might, but I mean, that's not what my gut is telling me. But I think the jury is going to come back, and the jury is going to get it right. Our jury system is wonderful. Juries get it right 99% of the time. When I talk to a jury, there's 12 people looking back at you, and their combined experience, they're way smarter than any single lawyer in the room, and even any judge in the room. And these jurors have heard some really good testimony from these witnesses. Yeah. And the testimony I've seen, and in the closing arguments, the arguments I saw that were being made by the defense today, they really were asking for sympathy. The defense is saying, look, he's 85, he's got dementia, let's be nice to him. It's almost like Tom Girardi saying to the prosecutor the other day, be nice to me, be nice to me. That's what they're asking this jury to do, and that's really not the function of this jury. What about all of these poor people, the Rui Gomez family and others that, the things that we heard about children couldn't get a bathtub in their home, and so the mother had to bathe the poor kid in bed, waiting for this settlement money to come in. And I think the prosecutors got this right, that this was a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
And Tom just kept more money coming in to pay all the past clients. And at some point that runs out of room and you can't make it anymore. And then we get this implosion. And unfortunately, there's some very good people here, people that look to a lawyer like Tom Girardi, who promised to help them, who promised to take care of them at a very awful time in their lives. And they're the ones that get stuck with the bill.
So to summarize, the defense argued that Tom was vulnerable because of this cognitive decline. And it was basically Christopher Kimone, who was the CFO at the time of Girardi Keese. He was the one that was actually operating this Ponzi scheme behind Tom Girardi's backs. And he was the one that was not paying the clients, not Tom. Tom wasn't aware that clients weren't getting their settlements. They also showed that Tom Girardi actually paid money back into the firm, I believe. So he's been accused of taking $15 million over the course of 10 years from 2010 to 2020, but they showed in court that he actually put $80 million of his own money back into the firm. And they're showing that, or they showed that, he was funding the firm personally more than he was actually benefiting from the firm. And then the prosecution argued that even though Tom, is currently in cognitive decline, and to the extent of that is to be determined. But while most of this was going on, he was not in cognitive decline, and he had the power to sign the checks. His name is ultimately on the law firm's wall, that he should have been aware of what was going on. And we also have emails and voicemails of him in correspondence with different clients showing that he was aware that they weren't getting their settlements. And basically, even though he was putting money back into the firm, the money that was going out, the priority was to pay for his personal expenses and lavish spending at the firm rather than it was to go to the clients. And they argued that even though Kimone does have some role in this fraud, he has his own trial that'll be coming up later down the line. But ultimately, the focus for this trial is on Tom Girardi, who, even though he's trying to throw the buck off onto Kimone, he was also complicit in this as well.
Yeah, and I think we've made the point too in our discussions about this case is that Kimone can be guilty, but Tom Girardi can also be guilty. So just because Kimone's a bad guy doesn't mean that Girardi's innocent in all of this. And I think, the money going in and out, I mean, there was close to 70 million that went out in expenses over the course of those 10 years, and then another 26 million that went out to Tom. I mean, there's just so much money going back and forth. It would be hard, I'm sure, to track it all down. But I do remember there was testimony that only Tom could sign checks out of the trust account. And that was important because whatever you say about Kimone or everybody else, only Tom could sign a check out of the trust account. And that's typical among, most law firms are set up that way.
Well, the defense did argue that Kimone had a stamp that had the signature on it, and he was essentially forging some of these checks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, my thoughts on the Christopher, is it Kimone? I've called him Cayman. So Christopher Kimone.
I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Okay, all right. Chris Kimone is kind of a so what argument in my mind. Really, it's a red herring because, Christopher Kimone may be everything that the allegations say he is. He might be a horrible person. He might have been paying $20,000 to his girlfriend. He might have been spending money lavishly, taking money from the firm. All those things can be true, but that does not absolve Tom Girardi. And the things that really hit me here are things like Tom Girardi telling his clients that he can't give them their settlement money because there's a special IRS rule that doesn't allow him to give women money without clearing the tax laws with the IRS for women only, because it doesn't apply to men. That there is a Supreme Court justice who was part of a mediation, a retired Supreme Court justice of California, was part of a mediation, and Tom kept blaming, well, we got to talk to the mediator before we can make, distribute your funds to you. I mean, the crazy stories that people heard. There was somebody that was told they would have a check waiting for them when they were entitled to $300,000 or $400,000, and they come to his office. They're all excited to get their money, and it's a $5,000 check, which no check would have been better than a $5,000 check. So the problem here, and this again goes to the whole timing issue with the mental capacity. They can't get back far enough because the crimes started in 2010. And the furthest that we heard them try to get back to was 2015. That's still 5 years off from 2010. But even in 2015, I think his longtime secretary, I forget her name, Shirley Fujimoto or something like that, she was not helpful to the defense. They tried to get her to say, that he didn't have the ability to appreciate and understand things, and she wouldn't go that far. So this man's testimony, and we were shocked when he took the stand, but this man's testimony, I think the jury's going to hold it against him.
Really? So you think it was a poor decision of the defense to put Tom on the stand?
Yeah, Keith and I were both shocked that, well, I don't know that the defense put him on the stand.
You think
there's the Alex Murdaugh case out of South Carolina where he also took the stand. And that's just a Hail Mary. It's literally at the 5-yard line, and you got to go 95 yards, and you have 1 second left in the game. And you're just throwing the ball up as hard as you can and as far as you can. And that's what Tom Girardi did here. Him taking the stand shows me that these capacity arguments are not that strong. Plus, you got Judge Staten, who's a very good jurist. She found in a competency hearing that he was feigning. He was feigning, saying he couldn't remember things. And if you remember when the public defender here was asking him questions, who am I? Well, it's so self-serving for Tom Girardi to say, "Oh, I don't know who you are. You're a mean man. You're a big mean man, but I don't know your name." That's just self-serving. He remembered that every client got every penny they were supposed to get. when he was asked if he could use his money to pay for Erika Girardi, Erika Jayne, whatever her name is, pay for her, music career out of client funds, he said, no, that would be wrong. He's appreciating the fact that there's a difference between right and wrong. And that's last week on the stand in front of this jury. So I don't think it's going to pay off for him.
Now, there were pieces of his testimony that to me sounded really intelligent. Like when he did refer to his attorney as bad, mean, terrible, immediately my head was like, oh, if he is aware of what he's doing, he's setting himself up for an appeal by saying that the public defender failed him and possibly even abused him because he does have Alzheimer's and dementia, and yet he was still put on the stand. His attorneys did not fight to keep him off of the stand. And so there were little things like that, or the Ruigomez family, when he kept referring to Joe Ruigomez as a drug addict, I was like, he wants the jury to hear this note over and over and over so that they associate Joe Ruigomez as a drug addict, and then immediately, that taints his testimony. Did you guys pick up some of the same things?
Yeah, the whole idea that Ruigomez was a drug addict and therefore he had to withhold money, I mean, that really rubbed me the wrong way because, I mean, even if, and I think Ruigomez did say that he developed some dependency upon drugs when he was in the hospital and suffering from pain, but that in and of itself is not sufficient to withhold money from a client. You just cannot do that. And Ruigomez and his mother both testified that we never authorized Tom Girardi to withhold money from us. And so once again, it just rings hollow when he's trying to say, well, I had to hold this back because Ruigomez would spend it on drugs. That's not your role as a lawyer. Your role is not to police your clients. Your role is to serve your clients. And he obviously, if it was reversed, where he would have to give Ruigomez more money than what Ruigomez was entitled to, maybe Tom Girardi would be believable. But it was, I can't give him this money because of his drug problem. I mean, I just didn't buy it. And I think that that's part of the problem too, is that Girardi gets up on the stand, says every client got every penny they were entitled to. I think he would have been better to at least admit some mistakes. I think his testimony would have been stronger if he would at least get up there and say, you know what? I didn't do things very well. I had a bad accounting system. I didn't pay attention to things as much as I should have. I think at least then he would have been a little bit more sympathetic. But to get up and say, I did nothing wrong and everybody got everything they deserved, I just think it worked against him.
Yeah. Do you think part of the intention was to come across charismatic so that the jury may feel some sort of sympathy for him?
I just want to jump in here that Tom Girardi is, before all of this, his legacy was a legal legend. I mean, he was the one that started really the PI lawyers. And there was a bunch of young PI lawyers at the time. They're now very good lawyers. I don't want to say their names because I don't want them associated with Tom Girardi, but they're fantastic personal injury attorneys that are about 20, 30 years behind him. They all looked up to him. They all emulated him. They all wanted to be Tom Girardi. And he knew how to talk to a jury. And so I think in his mind, even at 85 years old, I still think I can go out and play tackle football. I'm 50 years old now. I'm sure I would get tackled once and it would all be over. But I think in his mind, he still thought he could get in front of this jury and he could woo them with his charisma, which he still, I'm sure, is charismatic at times. The problem is that the sheen is not there any longer. And all these things he's been accused of, they seem to be backed up by the evidence that was presented at the trial. And the fact that his lawyers never really attacked that evidence head on. They talked about boogeymen like Christopher Kamen or Kimone. They talked about, that he didn't have the ability to appreciate and understand what was going on. I mean, those aren't defenses you use if there's a true defense that you can point out and say, look, this guy didn't do this. Somebody else did this, and it's wrong what's happening to him. And probably he would not have taken the stand if he didn't think he just needed to get out in front of this jury and get them to sympathize with him as an old man. And please don't hurt me. Please don't harm me at this advanced age that I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence against him is pretty ironclad. Like, you see the transfers, you see the amount of money that was coming out of trust accounts. What do you think of the defense's argument that he at least put money back into the firm? So if the money was going back into the firm, then technically, where did the money go? Oh, it looks like Kimone was the one that was stealing the money.
So as lawyers, we're not impressed by that, because when it comes to how we have to handle client money in our trust account, you're not allowed to touch it. And so if you take it, but your defense is, but I put it back, it's still unethical. It's still what you're not supposed to do. Is it criminal? That's a whole different, it is a little bit of a higher standard to be criminal versus unethical, but you just can't do it. And so the fact that, even if he said I spent 80 million for 10 years, but at the end of the 10 years, I put it back, that's just, as a lawyer, that's still wrong. It's completely wrong. And you're not allowed to do that. But I don't know, in terms of a jury looking at this and whether or not that saves him from being guilty criminally, maybe. I mean, maybe that helps sway the jury, but I think it was too little too late in terms of what the evidence needed to be. And like Stewart said, it didn't go to the heart of the matter. Did you do this or did you not? Yeah. And where's the evidence to show you did not?
And Zach, there's one other thing that really hit me hard here, and that is the Ruigomez family was told they received a $5 million settlement when in reality it was $52 or $53 million. And then the IRS agent here, who, by the way, I thought the defense did a good job poking holes in some of his accounting methods, right. But he did point out that as soon as that $53 million came in, it almost went out immediately to all the old clients in the firm that were still owed money. So again, that Ponzi scheme thing, which was part of the closing today by the government, where they're saying, look, this was just a Ponzi scheme and it ran out of steam. It didn't have the cash flow to continue at some point in time. But the Ruigomez family, that money was used to pay off all the old clients that were still waiting for their money. And then Tom was hoping he would have another Aaron Brockovich case or some other case in the future where he could then pay the Ruigomez family. And that would go on and on and on.
I mean, and we heard from, multiple staffers that worked at Girardi Keese that the money was being spent very lavishly. I mean, outside of just, what was spent on Erika Jayne's music career, I mean, the parties that he was throwing, it was so exuberant that he was trying to, show off this wealth. And meanwhile, you have clients that are calling and saying, I'm not getting my settlement. And it was interesting to see that the priorities of the firm were to continue to show off how well the firm was doing. Meanwhile, the clients were over here struggling. And hearing their testimonies in court, I'm sure the jury was very moved by it. I mean, I think it was the Erica Saldana case with her son who was paraplegic after the car accident. That one, I think, was the most, really pulled on the heartstrings. What do you guys?
It did. What happened to that young man? And I think he ultimately passed away, right? He was very young when he ultimately did pass away. And I don't think they ever did receive, I think it was $1 million or so they should have received, and they just simply didn't get it. I will say that Keith and I, we're part of the Consumer Association Attorneys of Los Angeles. It's called CalLaw for short. And we have an annual retreat in Vegas every year. And it happens to be that we're going Wednesday. And that was a big thing for Girardi to be at. In fact, he was one of the people that was involved heavily in CalLaw. And I still remember as a very young lawyer going to my first few CalLaws, and I heard about the Tom Girardi parties. Now, we didn't know all this other stuff, but everybody wanted to be part of these parties because they were so brilliant and so much fun. Well, now we know why. It's because there was extra cash to burn for these parties.
Yeah. Joe Mendoza asks if and when Tom is found guilty and sentenced, how likely is it for Erika Jayne's divorce filing to get processed sooner? So we know that everything's kind of been in holding. She filed for divorce back in December 2020, which is really just what kind of tipped everything into motion. That's when Jay Edelson then started to poke holes into, I believe he called it at the time, a sham divorce, because he thought it was Tom Girardi trying to conceal assets or move money over to Erica to protect their assets. And the divorce has kind of been impending ever since then. How soon will all these other legal matters move now that, he does still have his case in Illinois or his trial in Illinois that's supposed to be coming up too.
Yeah, he has other criminal matters. So there's, I think, two issues, and I haven't studied the divorce in depth, but I think there's two issues that are a problem. One is Tom is under conservatorship. And so that's part of what slowed down the divorce, although his conservator can still work on the divorce anyway. And then secondly, pending criminal trials, you can't get him to testify, on anything against himself. He can take the fifth until the criminal trials are wrapped up. I don't know if that's what's holding up the divorce or not. or if there's some other aspect to it, because I haven't really studied the divorce, but I would imagine that the fact that he could still take the fifth is a problem, and then the fact that he's under conservatorship. Although I always thought the conservatorship was a little bit of a red herring as well, just because it's not that hard. Like I could file, if you wanted to be under conservatorship, Zach, for some reason, I could file tomorrow, and as long as you don't object to it and nobody objects to it, you'll be under conservatorship. So it's not that hard to be under conservatorship if you want to be, which of course here Tom did want to be to try to show his incapacity.
Yeah, it's definitely benefited him. With Erica specifically, is there a chance that let's say we don't even get that far, because he's getting up there in age, since they are still technically married? Is it possible that if he passes away, she would inherit some of his debts?
Yeah, that's interesting. So in order, possibly. And so there is an issue between separate property debt and community property debt. And not to get too far into the weeds here, but a spouse could be liable for community property debt, but not separate debt. And so probably the law firm and everything associated with the law firm was separate property of Tom's. So she probably, just from a kind of big picture thinking about this, would not be liable for his debts or any lawsuits that came out of the law firm, would be my guess. But people would probably argue about that, and they would probably say, well, some of it should be community, so she should be partially responsible. So there could be arguments that come out of his estate if he were to pass away, where they attempt to get the debts to go against Erica. But by and large, she probably would be protected against most of it, would be my guess.
How long do you think it'll take for the jury to come to a decision? Do you think by Tuesday we'll have an answer?
So Keith and I have been debating this, and obviously a quicker decision is probably not good news for Mr. Girardi. A longer decision, obviously, generally speaking, is better, because that means there's somebody, 1, 2, 3, that are against the idea that he's guilty. But my feeling is that Tuesday is going to happen, because this is a pretty clear-cut case. Here's the other issue, Zach, and that is, we're a very divided country right now, more divided than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Yeah. And I think that there is one group of people that all of us, whether we're on the left or the right or in between, can agree on, and that is, you don't hurt widows and orphans. Yeah. And so widows and orphans have been hurt here and harmed here, especially by somebody that's supposed to help them. You know, it'd be one thing if he was just passing by, but he was given charge to help these people during some of the darkest hours of their life, and they were left without. And this jury is going to, you're not supposed to do this, but they're going to be in the jury room, and they're going to personalize this case and say, how would I feel if this happened to me? And so unless there's somebody that just wants to be cantankerous and difficult and make a name for themselves, perhaps, I think all these jurors are going to come back with guilty verdicts.
How much time do you think he'll ultimately, or what do you think he'll even serve time?
Well, I mean, possibly. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I would imagine that there's all kinds of procedural things that will be filed after whatever happens. So if he's found guilty, there'll be an appeal. But I think that they could put him in custody pending the appeal. They did that to Alex Murdaugh. Of course, he had murdered 2 people. So this is wire fraud. It's a little different. So I don't know if the court system would say, no, we're going to let him out on bail. I don't even know if he can post bail. So it's a little bit above my pay grade to talk about what would happen in that regard. But my guess is he's 85. He does not look well. You can see people are helping him up and down the steps at the courthouse. I believe that to be true. I mean, when you're 85, your body doesn't work like it used to. So, you know, he's probably not long for the world. And this has to be very stressful on him, even though he's done wrong. Maybe he can't admit it, but going through this process is extremely stressful.
Yeah, I mean, and he's been in the assisted care facility since 2021. So he's been there for a few years. There's not much, I would imagine, outside of, putting together a defense for this case. There's not much mental stimulation that's going on there that, I would assume the cognitive decline has continued to progress. But again, I think the good argument that the prosecution made was, even if now he's starting to go, he was fully there during a lot of, or at least these other 4 cases. He was still with it. He was aware of what was going on. and the voicemails and the emails all prove that. Do you think that there's any chance that this really was all the CFO and he really was not aware of what was going on?
That's really hard to imagine. I mean, I guess you could construct a scenario or a story where you say that he was so in the dark and, Cayman or come on, sorry, I forgot the pronunciation, is, using the signature stamp. He's keeping Tom in the dark. He's paying Tom's bills. So Tom's none the wiser. His mortgage is paid. His car payments getting paid. But boy, that's really, it would go against the evidence that I heard, that's for sure. And the emails and the excuses. And that's the thing too, is that Tom was making excuses to the clients who weren't getting money. You would think that if you thought everything was being done properly and a client came to you and said, hey, where's my money? You would be typing out an email to your CFO saying, hey, how come this person keeps telling me they haven't gotten paid? How come they haven't gotten paid? And you would tell the client, you know what, let me check with my CFO. I don't understand this. You should have got paid already. And there was none of that evidence. There's just none of those emails like that.
Yeah, there's nothing that shows that Tom was trying to find where the money was as he was giving people the runaround. He was aware that there were no funds there. Meanwhile, he was still lavishly spending personally and at the company as well.
And no emails to Cayman saying, hey, Cayman, where's this money? Come on.
I mean, what was your reaction to his ex going on the stand, the CFO, his ex coming up and talking about the $20,000 a month that she was getting and all the properties that he was planning on liquidating when he had this whole plan to flee to the Bahamas? That to me was wild. And I think if they bring her back for his trial, that's really what's going to lock him up. But that to me was probably one of the juicier parts of the trial.
Yeah, and the fact that she's half his age, so that makes it sexy. Everybody wants to watch it. He's paying her $20,000 a month, paying for her to have nice cars. Apparently, she asked about a bank account at some point that was supposed to be set aside for her, and that's when things went south. But then he also calls her when all of this falls through, the house of cards comes down. He calls this 24-year-old woman, and there's nothing wrong with being 24, but he's 48 or 44 or something. He calls her and tells her he's going to flee the country, flee to the Bahamas, which he flees to the Bahamas. And I think I don't know how long he's there. He's not there long. And then he came back to, was it Rhode Island or Annapolis or Maryland or something, where he comes back and they arrest him. So his fleeing, it didn't last that long. It's almost like running away as a child from home. You realize all of a sudden, well, maybe home wasn't so bad and you come back. But in this case, he got arrested.
Well, I think
his trial, when is
temporarily.
Is it
he was
January?
only here to visit. I think it's in January.
Yeah. What were you saying, Zach? I missed that.
Well, I was saying the crazy part is he was only here temporarily, I think, to visit. He had something that he was cleaning up with his sister or something. So he had come back from the Bahamas for like a brief period of time. And it was at the airport back to the Bahamas that they just happened to catch him. Like his luck. He was done. He liquidated all his properties here. He was ready to start his new life in the Bahamas. And he came back for that brief stint. And that's when they got him.
Well, we'll have to come back when his case is on, because he's going to be saying Tom Girardi did all of it and he did not. So we're going to hear just the exact opposite argument being made. So
I think you're right, though, that the girlfriend's going to convict him. And I thought that was the juiciest part of this trial and entirely irrelevant to Tom Girardi, quite frankly. But yeah, it was interesting.
That's what the prosecution kept trying to argue. They're like, this is great that they have all of this info on Christopher, but like, we're talking about Tom here. Like, he's the focus. And the defense kept trying to deflect away from that. But Keith, how do you think that this is going to shake out with the jury?
I mean, I would have to think it'll be a guilty verdict. I think that we're going to get the verdict probably tomorrow, maybe by lunchtime, maybe early afternoon. I don't think it's going to be a long deliberation, would be my guess. And I think we'll see a guilty verdict for Tom. I think he will appeal it, obviously. And I think that's going to tie it up for quite a few years. I did see the 20 years that he potentially could get per count. Those usually run consecutive, and I don't think that the judge would necessarily give him 20 years. But back to Stewart's point, 10 years, 15 years, it's all a life sentence for Tom Girardi at this point.
Do you think there's a chance that he doesn't serve any prison time and maybe he's able to serve the rest of his term out in his care facility?
I don't think so. I mean, I would think that if I were the judge on a case like this, I would want to see at least some prison time. And, I wouldn't be very sympathetic to somebody in that position if he's found guilty to say, yeah, just go ahead and live in the care facility. I would think even if the judge is being, showing some mercy, I think he still would want to see, a year, 2, 3, something of prison time before any possibility of parole or release.
We'll have to see. I mean, and I believe next he also has Girardi has, I think in March of next year is his Illinois trial and that one's with the orphans and widows case. So we'll see how that plays out. I know
You're talking about the airline disaster?
Yeah. The Lion Air case. And we'll have to say, I know Edelson's been after him for a while. Jay Edelson, who's co-counsel on that case, and he's the one who really started fanning the flames. I mean, unfortunately, I think the smartest thing that Edelson did was really drag Erica into it because that's what brought so much attention. Obviously, Tom Girardi was a big figure here in Los Angeles, but I feel like the attention of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and that playing out on the show in real time as Erica was filming that season, I think that's ultimately what got people to really put eyes on this.
Well, and Zach, what did you think? I don't know what your background is, but what did you think when you heard the idea that there was actually footage from the Real Housewives that was played for the jury in 2019, where Tom sounds very capacitated? He's talking about his alma mater and how many women lawyers are there. I mean, what was your impression when you saw that?
I mean, well, I watched the show when it was airing in real time he seemed very charismatic. I mean, they even showed, I think during his testimony, the prosecution ended with a podcast interview that he did. And I interviewed that lawyer that interviewed him, Daniel Feruzin, who had his podcast. And I remember he was very excited to have Tom Girardi on because he's, a big legal giant here in Los Angeles. And watching that interview, Tom really seemed coherent. And that was October of 2020, and then he was immediately under conservatorship come December. So October, November, December, that's less than 3 months that I was like, I don't know if I buy that. I remember when the divorce news came out. And it seemed like Erica kind of wanted to hide it because she filed for divorce on election day. So I think they thought that it wasn't really going to get picked up by the press because the focus was on the election. And then it was within a matter of days that Jay Edelson came out and called it a sham divorce and said, no, Tom Girardi hasn't been paying his clients. I represent some of the clients, and I think that this is a sham divorce, and they're using this to move money over. And then, ultimately Erica since come out and said she had no clue any of this was going on. She just saw that. I think she could tell that it was starting to circle the drain, and she wanted out.
And we saw no evidence in this trial that Erica had any knowledge of anything that was happening, in terms of what they charged Tom with on these counts. But have you seen anything, Zach, where Erica has any type of knowledge of any of this?
No. And I did interview her back in October. I sat down with her and, we talked about the marriage. We talked about her exit plan. We talked about, all of the legal fallout since then. And she's maintained that she didn't know anything. She's like, listen, I was the third wife. Like, he wasn't coming home giving me the details of what was going on at the law firm. And she was like, and who was I to question? Which to me, I guess growing up in Los Angeles, it's very unlikely that someone like Christopher Kimone is telling his 24-year-old girlfriend all of the details, because once you do, they can sing in court later when the funds have run dry, So I tend to believe that she really didn't. And listen, when life's good and the Amex isn't getting declined, you're not really asking questions. You're just, shopping at Neiman Marcus and you're good, So yeah. I don't think she knew anything. I know a lot of people were like, well, but he spent lavishly on her and he was giving her money, which we now learned she was just living off of the Amex that was now being paid by Girardi Keese. But I mean, we also found out in court that there were multiple Amexes that were out and all of these bills were being paid. And it was all just one big lump sum of money. Client trust funds, operating accounts, everything was just all used as one big money pot, which, I mean, you guys know best. That's not something you typically do when you have clients that need this money.
No, yeah, you absolutely do not do that. Do you know if they had a prenup, Tom and Erica?
I believe they did have a prenup. And the prenup basically said she didn't get it. Oh no, I don't believe they had a prenup.
Okay. This is a situation because you asked before about whether Erica would be responsible for Tom's debts. If they had a prenup, it actually would help her because usually you specify what's separate in that. So I was just curious if you knew if they had a prenup or not. But still, I mean, yeah, I don't find it hard to believe that she didn't know because I think you're right. Well, as long as the jet's fueled up and the credit card's being paid, what do you care when you're in that situation?
Now, I do know that Edelson, in his case, with and he's representing the Lion Air crash victims or former clients, he has accused Erica of kind of being used as the front man. And in his civil lawsuit, there aren't any criminal charges against her, but in his civil lawsuit, he says that they basically used Erica as the front face to show how wealthy they were so that they can hide the fact that they were struggling with funds at the firm. Do you think that there will be any case against her if she was the, ignorant face of the scheme? Because she was on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She was, the celebrity that was showing off all of this wealth. Do you think that there will be any sort of ramifications for her in that civil lawsuit?
I don't know enough about the civil lawsuit, but it seems to me that they would have to have some proof that she was involved. And so there's going to have to be some type of documentary evidence or witness testimony that she knew or that she was involved. But I just don't know enough to comment on it. I do know that as lawyers, we tend to name everybody in cases. Yeah. And then usually by the time we get to trial, we let some people go. But I just don't know enough about it. I wish I could give you a better answer. Keith, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, but the thing that came to my mind when you were saying that is the $12 million loan that was given to Girardi and Keese that wasn't paid back. There was a person who testified, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, during the trial about how they were not paid back on that $12 million loan, and they weren't even told that a settlement came in that should have triggered the payback. And you do kind of wonder if maybe putting on a good face and showing how rich you were helped get loans like that. And, these $12 million litigation loans, and they didn't even, normally they require it so that they have access to your bank account so they can monitor your bank account. Girardi refused to do it, and they made the loan anyway. And maybe it's because of this perception of being rich. But yeah, they would have to have some proof that Erica, knew what was going on and intentionally participated in it.
Yeah, my theory was always they were just naming her in the lawsuit so that the press would keep picking up on it. Because when you hear Erika Jayne's named in a $55 million lawsuit that's, being represented for the orphans and widows that were wronged by Tom Girardi, that in and of itself is a salacious enough headline to keep, the momentum going in the press. But the interesting thing about the $12 million loan that you brought up, it looked like he was taking out a lot of loans. And I've heard this theory. I know Kimberly Archie, who used to work for Girardi Keese, has put this theory out there that it's possible that a lot of attorneys and legal lenders were all kind of just scratching each other's backs, lending each other money. Because we even found out, as the investigation was going on, that there were, I think, 2 different loans that Tom put the house up as collateral for, which you typically can't put the same property up for collateral in 2 different loans with 2 different lenders.
Yeah. And these litigation loans, they happen all the time. People use them, law firms rely on them a lot, and they usually charge a pretty high interest rate, and that's where you make your money. But yeah, I don't know in terms of, people scratching each other's backs, I don't know anything about that, or I don't have enough evidence to even remark on that, but it does happen a lot. And it is a relatively close-knit community of lenders and firms that they work with. And so it wouldn't surprise me if people had some understanding or maybe some knowledge about what was happening there with Girardi and Keese along the way. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, now I want to pick your guys' brains on so many other cases that we've been covering recently. So maybe I'll have to bring you guys back on at some point. But you've been covering this Girardi case. You guys have your own YouTube channel that people can subscribe to and support at. Where are the handles or the links that people can go and keep up with you guys?
So on YouTube, we're at Aldav Law. So it's ALDAVLAW, Aldav Law, which is just a shortened version of Albertson and Davidson. And that's where we have all of our YouTube videos. We've been doing YouTube videos for years, but we finally decided to get serious about doing a podcast and bought all the appropriate mics and cameras and decided to start off with the Girardi trial. And we're happy we did. It's gotten us we've been able to meet a lot of interesting people, and we really appreciate you having us on, Zach. This is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you guys have done daily updates on the trial. So on their YouTube, everyone, if you guys want to go and subscribe and watch, there are daily updates in each video to give you a recap of what went down in court. We're now on today's day 12, I believe.
12. Yeah. Today's day 12, and we'll put out our update on day 12 tomorrow. We always do it the next day after we have a chance to digest all the news reports. And then, of course, we'll have to wrap up when the verdict comes out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So when the jury comes back, they're not the ones that determine the sentencing. That's the judge. So they'll just come back with they're going to give a verdict for each of the 5 counts, correct?
Correct. Yeah, each count will have to be found something, either guilty, not guilty, or they couldn't come to a determination.
Is there any chance they won't come to a determination?
Again, it's interesting because you watch, the movies like Runaway Jury, and you always wonder about this. I mean, again, these are widows and orphans and people that were very sympathetic, that were harmed by a very powerful man that was supposed to help them. But there's sometimes people that just want to be different and stand out. Maybe they want to write a book. But I hope everyone there is honorable and does the right thing here. And again, I haven't been there daily in the courtroom, but the evidence I'm seeing, I think this guy is despicable for what he did, and he should be held accountable.
I agree. And I think, it was a good Hail Mary last ditch effort to, I thought that the defense made a better case than I was even expecting. I really didn't have high hopes, but they kind of made me look at it a little differently in hearing their defense, because they took some creative liberties that I wasn't expecting, or even just the fact that, he paid the money back to me. I was like, oh, well, that is some sort of a redeeming quality. And it did, for that moment, make me forget about, oh no, there are emails and voicemails and all this information that proves that he was aware.
Yeah, they definitely did the best that they could. And so they put on the best case that they could. I don't think it's going to be enough, but they didn't have much to work with. So,
well, no, their client has Alzheimer's and dementia. How is he going to help them?
That's right.
Stewart, Keith, thank you guys for joining today. And I will definitely have to have you guys back on soon.
Happy to come back.
Thank you so much.
I have plenty of other pop culture cases that I can throw your way, that if you guys want to cover those trials as well, we can do cross collabs, because I have lots of questions and lots of cases that I'm sure you guys would enjoy.
Awesome.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's chat with Stewart and Keith. The link is in the description below if you do want to give them a follow. They're with Albertson and Davidson LLP. I believe their account is also here in the live chat, so you can go and check them out. Give them a follow, subscribe, watch their videos. They will continue to give you daily updates. Coupletlaw.com has been giving some good updates. LA Times has been giving updates. Let's see. Amanda Brodstad on Twitter has been really good. We also have Megan Kuniff on Twitter that's been very good. The Talk of Shame has been covering it on Instagram. So those are all great resources if you guys want to cover, if you want to keep up to date with the daily coverage of the Girardi trial. I will be back tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have an answer, and we'll see where the jury takes us. But it's been an interesting journey since the divorce filing to the first criminal trial, because we still have one more coming up, and we also have Christopher Kimone's trial that's coming up as well, so I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you later. Stacy says, Zach, you're so great at your job. You really are. You can be a news reporter. You're so knowledgeable. A news reporter. Well, I don't know. I think I'll stick to the internet, but thank you. I love you guys. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you later.